Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Altcoin Buzz Trading. I'm Randy, and today we're going to be taking a look at Mask Network and BNB as well as Bitcoin. Also, stay tuned for our TA tip of the day, and I'd like to ask you guys a question. If you would please reply down in the comments, send us an email, carrier pigeon, whatever, however you want to get it to us. What would you guys like to see out of a Altcoin Buzz Trading channel? We're trying different things here. We're trying to give you guys a couple trades a day, hoping you guys like that. But what are you interested in? Are you interested in educational topics? Are you interested in actionable topics? Are you interested in general strategies? What would you guys like to see? So I know I've got a different YouTube channel, and I know what my audience likes. I want to know what you guys like. This is Altcoin Buzz. So what does the Altcoin Buzz audience want to see? Let us know down below. All right, let's get to the charts, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to start off with Mask today, kind of switching it up. This was a trade that we discussed yesterday. The market generally overall seems like we're waiting to go lower. This one's actually starting. And I think one of the reasons that we found it is because it has a pretty good chart pattern to it. Hence the TA part of, of what we're doing here. So let's adjust our trade here a little bit. We had this stop here a little bit wide at about 5.6%, because we've already broken out, and this is actually a pretty good breakout. If you notice the volume coming in here on the 2-hour time frame, it was much larger than all this other volume. That is a pretty good traditional breakout. Now our daily volume here yesterday was pretty good. It was kind of above these, could have been a little bit bigger, so we may see some stalling action somewhere. Lately what we've been noticing is support down by these wicks from the prior breakdown. So there's still quite a bit of ways to go here, but one thing we can do is actually lower our stop now that the trade is on. We didn't really even come up to this prior high over here on the 2-hour time frame. So we can lower this to a 2.69% stop, which actually increases our risk reward ratio to almost 10, which is pretty darn good. And that is if it gets all the way down to the bottom here. But so far, so good on this trade. We'll see how it reacts. If we do have a low volume rise into this trend line here, that could also be a shortable opportunity. And it generally should be a low volume rise. You don't want this to start running up in here really fast on a lot of volume, and then all of a sudden, you're shorting. You don't want that. You want to find the weakness in here, and then you can short, which is pretty much what we've been talking all last week, is looking for weakness, lower highs, and then looking to short. But the market's been more stable up here, not rising, but stable, implying it hasn't been breaking to the downside. So what you're going to find out is that as the market breaks down, you're going to see some of those trades start to work. They'll just look different between when we talked about them and when they actually break down. So Mask is looking pretty good here. Next up, let's take a look at BNB. Now, you guys actually got a video for my power hour the other day. Apologies about that. That's my mistake. But I do want to say that BNB, we have a couple things going on with BNB. So let me zoom out. Okay, I'm confusing myself here. Let me zoom out and go full screen here. Bear with me as I learn how to deal with these friggin' charts. Okay, so two things going on with BNB right now. First of all, there's a much larger bear flag in the mix here, right? So BNB chopping around, blah, blah, blah. And then we end up dropping right here with the rest of the market. And we've been in a large consolidation since then. And then it dropped, right? So we were consolidating here for about 2 months. And then we had a large drop. Volume stepped in, right? That's what we just learned we want to see on the drops. Volume stepped in. We broke through an alert level that I had on this of 239.20. And then now we're doing something interesting. We're forming an inverted head and shoulders pattern. An inverted head and shoulders pattern is one where you have a low, and then you have a lower low, and then a higher low. Now, one thing about an inverted head and shoulders pattern is the volume signature should generally be declining across this whole time frame, right? So if you go back to the 2-hour time frame, what are we going to see here? We're going to see that signature. We're going to see a low, a lower low, in this case 2 lower lows, and then here it's what's called the multiple head and shoulders pattern, where you have multiple shoulders, even multiple heads, but notice that the volume is still in this declining pattern that I was just discussing. So the crux of this pattern is that we try to go lower here off of this low. We can't, okay? One of the reasons we can't is because the volume is lower. So we end up reversing higher we stall a little bit at the previous highs, and then we try to go a little bit lower again. We can't because once again volume is lower, and then we reverse upwards. And in terms of the multiple head and shoulders, it's kind of the same thing, just with more spikes to the downside in this case. But then once we get volume incoming, it generally will break this trend line and increase, hopefully increase, because this is a reversal pattern to the upside, right? So 219.60 is the alert that I have for this, and then breaking up here. Let's take a look at our risk reward at this particular point in time. So our target is up here for only about 8%. This isn't a big trade. And at this point, you could put your stop under here. Let's give it a little bit of space. Let's zoom in here. So we're going to go under this low in the last shoulder, and then we're going to undercut that a little bit to give it some room. And that's a 3.4 risk reward trade is what that is. And this actually, even though it's more of a bullish setup, I just mentioned a large bearish measured move, right? All the way down to 154, I think it is. How can this happen, right? How can you have a larger bearish setup and a shorter term bullish setup? Well, I'll explain that in a number of ways. Number one, this may not play out very well. And then number two, let's go back out to the daily time frame. If you notice, this is a much larger bearish setup. And if this rallies into, let me get that out of the way for a second. If this rallies into my breakdown point of the 239.20, it's still within the trend. So this can play out because it still stays within the downtrend. It just gives the downtrend more time to play out. Is this a guaranteed trade? No, it's not. Like I said, it's a somewhat bearish environment right now. Well, I guess if I haven't said it before, it's a somewhat bearish environment right now. So our bias needs to be to the downside, but this is a potentially actionable trade with a very viable setup. BNB is a very good coin. It tends to trade very well off of technicals, and this is a potential trade, right? All right, so let's bring this back in, and then we'll go take a look at Bitcoin. Always got to look at Bitcoin every day. I've got to look at Bitcoin every day. No, I don't mind it because Bitcoin actually trades pretty well also based off of technicals. Most of your larger assets will trade well based off of technicals. But one thing that's going on here is that we're not reversing back upwards. When we get a situation where we've had a large drop or even a large pop and we're able to kind of hold that trajectory, hold that trend, in this case, stay lower, we're less likely to pop up the longer we stay lower, okay? And I think we may have mitigated that time. We're on the cusp of mitigating that time where we're probably not going to bounce back up and create what's called a Bart pattern, right? Where you got the spiky Bart hair, and then it just goes back up because he's got those big sides to his hair like that. So we're probably not going to do that, not spike back up like this. We're probably, we could still fake to the upside, then end up going back down lower. So BTC is still kind of in a holding pattern. Even on the shorter term time frame here, we're really not doing a lot. We are getting a little bit of elevated volume to the downside. On my volume aggregation tool, you can see the orange is elevating just a little bit as well. And our RSI is pretty much on the shorter time frames. We can do anything here. On the daily time frames, our RSI is still pretty low. We're still underneath that 30 point but we are wearing away those really, really low RSI levels. We need to get up a little more, in my opinion. But if this thing cracks down hard to the downside, it may not matter. Look for volume as your signature for the general market direction here, and also the overall break in Bitcoin. And your level for Bitcoin is essentially 25,266 for that larger break. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining me. Your TA tip of the day today. What's it going to be? Drums are rolling. Your TA tip of the day is volume. Some actual TA on my tip of the day here. Volume is, there's some people that trade without volume. I think that's a little foolhardy depending on your strategy. But if you have a momentum-based strategy, which generally technical analysis is kind of a momentum-based strategy, there are some things that don't necessarily deal with volume. But volume, if you'll notice, anything of consequence that happens on the chart happens when there's larger volume. And if you can learn to read the volume, you can learn how the market will generally trend. What is a fake break? What is a real break? And we use volume constantly. One of the things with volume is that it is the voting of the whales, okay, that creates the volume. You and I don't create the big volume spikes. It is the whales that creates these big volume spikes. So on the way up here, on this uptrend here, we'll use this as an example, right? You have volume stays pretty heavy through here. And one of the reasons it stays heavy is because there's some accumulation happening in here. Even though we do move lower, you see this line, which is actually our price line here. Even as we move lower here, we don't move that much lower. This volume steps in, and if you look at my volume tool here, my volume aggregation tool, look at right where we start to trend up is right at that low candle. So the volume steps in here. You can start to see it a little bit. It may not be bigger than all these, but in context, it's pretty healthy. You get two nice volume candles, some rest, and then some follow through, right? So really pay attention to volume. Learn how to read the volume. If you're looking at charts, please make sure volume is part of your reading. All right, ladies and gentlemen, any questions you have, put them in the comments. I'll be happy to answer. And I'll see you next time on Altcoin Buzz Trading.